Well, welcome, Vaishnavis. Welcome again to our Sangha, Vaishnavi Ministry North America Sangha. It's so good to see all of you, many of you back again, continuing to build this community and infuse our devotional lives with so much beautiful energy of Vaishnavis and these wonderful classes that we've been taking together. So today we have with us a very special devotee to talk to us about a very special topic. We have Rukmiṇī Devī Dāsī. She's here to speak with us about Brahma-saṁhitā, seeing with the eye of devotion. So in this class, she will take us through a tour of some of this enchanting revelation of the Brahma-saṁhitā, illuminating the destination where the path of Krishna consciousness is leading all of us. Krishna's entire transcendental abode unfolds before us from our mantras, just as a mighty tree comes forth from a seed, and the Brahma-saṁhitā gives us a preview of what is in store for us. So again, we have Rukmiṇī Devī Dāsī. She was introduced to Krishna consciousness from childhood. She grew up in ISKCON Denver and then ISKCON Los Angeles. In 1991, Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Goswami gave her first initiation. And in 2006, Srila Bhakti Ballabh Tirtha Goswami gave her second initiation. She has a PhD in mathematics and now lives in Columbus, Ohio, where she works as a data scientist. Rukmiṇī Devī Dāsī has been teaching Krishna consciousness publicly since 2013. She's been giving temple classes at ISKCON Columbus on Sundays and weekdays since 2015, and participates in other services there, such as Columbus Bhakti Yoga Outreach, the outreach group, and she currently serves as one of the secretaries of SAC, the Shastric Advisory Council of ISKCON. She is currently co-authoring a book with Her Grace Urmila Devi Dāsī. So I'll now just hand it over to you, Rukmiṇī Devī Dāsī. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your energy and your wisdom with us today. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. And so here I will start sharing my screen. So I should first acknowledge that, as you mentioned, my co-author is Her Grace Urmila Devi Dāsī, and also several of the slides are also, or actually many of the slides are due to her. She had shared her PowerPoint and given me some suggestions. And then also I'll credit some other people as they come up. So what is the topic? You are seeing this. You are now seeing my slides? Okay, very good. All right.
You're seeing your slides in the whole window. That is the slides, like the layout, reset, all of that. So.
All right. So I want this to.
Could you move it to the left a little bit, please?
Yes, I'm trying to go to slideshow mode. Is this better?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay.
Better.
All right. Okay, so here is our topic, Brahma-saṁhitā, and it is a very wonderful topic. It is the revelation of Krishna to Lord Brahma that Lord Brahma very kindly has shared in this compilation, and then we are going to see a glimpse of it through this slide. So first, how did Brahma-saṁhitā spread? What was the history? So first, Krishna revealed himself to Lord Brahma, which is this history is narrated in the Brahma-saṁhitā itself, and then Lord Brahma compiled it in 100 chapters, and it is a Sanskrit text. However, those 100 chapters are mostly lost to us. There is another text called Brihat Brahma-saṁhitā, which is different. There's 100 chapters of that, but that is not the same as the Brahma-saṁhitā that we are speaking of. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took a pilgrimage to South India shortly after he took sannyas. And in the Adikeshava temple at Tiruvattar, he found that the Brahmanas there had preserved one portion of this 100 chapter work, which was the 5th chapter. And here we see Adikeshava at Tiruvattar, that amazing temple by the Payasvani River. So he had the Brahmanas there, he had them copy that 5th chapter manuscript, and that was the first moment of its spread from outside of that temple where it had been preserved for who knows how long, millennia, started to spread to the wider Vaishnava world. So then he had gone on this pilgrimage to South India, and then on his way north, he then encountered Ramananda Rai at Kovur on the Godavari River, and he said that he would make a copy for him. He would have a copy made for him. And then when he got back finally to Jagannath Puri, where he was staying in his sannyas years, he then had a copy made for Vasudev Datta. So those were the first 2 copies that were made. And then there were more and more and more copies. So in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 11, text 143, Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami says that indeed each and every Vaishnava copied the 2 books. By and by, the 2 books, the Brahma-saṁhitā and Sri Krishna Karnamrita, which he also found there, were broadcast all over India. So the story of actually finding them is from Madhya Lila chapter 9. And this is when he had returned, and then he had them copied and spread everywhere. So fast forward to the 19th century, we have Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So he wrote a commentary on this Brahma-saṁhitā, and he began this commentary with a song. So in the first 2 verses of the song, he talks about how Lord Brahma made this Brahma-saṁhitā in 100 chapters, and how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu found this 5th chapter and had recopied it. And then in the 3rd verse of his song, he says that his Diksha Guru, Bipin Bihari Goswami, asked him to write a commentary. So that is how this Bengali commentary came about. Now that Bengali commentary has been translated several times into English, and you can find other translations on the web. They're freely available. But the one that we have is the one from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. So he was the son and also a student of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he is of course the Gurudev of Srila Prabhupada A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. So he created an English translation and commentary, and this was printed at Mylapore, Madras in 1932. And my sister Rupa Mandri has kindly given pictures of this is an original copy of that original printing. And so here is Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So he is the one who first gave the English translation that we have. And so then Srila Prabhupada, when he arrived in the West, he didn't bring this particular book with him, but he brought the prayers, and he started teaching them to his disciples. So beginning with the Govindam prayers, beginning with Chintamani Prakara Sadmasu. And so his disciples were starting to sing them. So I spoke with Malati Prabhu the other day for some time about this. She said that she thinks she remembers that they were already singing them in San Francisco. And they started with the first 5 verses. And also Pradyumna Prabhu, his disciple, who was a Sanskrit scholar, he had studied Sanskrit at Columbia University. He also got a copy of the Brahma-saṁhitā. And now this book here, it was an English translation, but the Sanskrit was all in Devanagari script. So it was not it was only to people who could read that script would be able to read the Sanskrit. So already in 1970, Srila Prabhupada was writing letters to, or actually starting in 1968, Srila Prabhupada was writing letters to Pradyumna Prabhu saying that he could start, he would be transliterating and putting diacritical marks on the Brahma-saṁhitā for the translation that would be for the ISKCON devotees. And I'm not sure why, but the printing, it was delayed for about 6 years. So starting in 1976, that's where we have a letter he's writing to Jashodanandan and saying that there will be that they can print the Brahma-saṁhitā with the transliteration and also the word for word. So that's from Pradyumna Prabhu. So meanwhile, beginning in 1969, the group of devotees, 6 or 7 devotees, went from Montreal to London to meet the Beatles. And as we all know, that they had the Hare Krishna temple, the Radha Krishna temple album. So let me stop sharing so that I can get to that. That's in a different file here. So the first single that they made was the Hare Krishna mantra. So George Harris, it's a famous story, and it's an amazing story how they set out to meet the Beatles in order to preach Krishna consciousness all over the world, and their plan actually worked. So they did meet the Beatles, and George Harrison in particular was very enthusiastic he had already been enthusiastic from their record that he had heard before. And so he did want to meet them and to send them to create a new recordings with them. So the first single that they recorded was the Hare Krishna mantra, and the second single that they recorded was Govinda, so the Govindam prayers. And this is not coming up, so I will just tell you. So in the book Love, Medicine, and Music by Gurudas Prabhu, Roger Siegel, he describes the recording of the Govinda prayers. So I'll just tell you. Govinda, the second single by the Radha Krishna Temple, was recorded at Trident Studios in an alley off Wardour Street near Piccadilly Circus. So for those of you who know London, it's a very that's a very famous part of London where the devotees were recording. It was the Apple Studios recording. So for this record, George consulted with George Martin, who was also known as the fifth Beatle because his arrangements so enhanced their music. So he was the producer of a lot of their music. And so it was George Martin who thought that strings, choruses, and a harp would go nicely with Mukunda's original arrangement. So then this is Gurudas Prabhu continuing to speak. During this recording session, our mood was a bit more intense and uncertain. We rarely sang the Govinda prayers from the Brahma-saṁhitā. We hadn't practiced much, and we now had to coordinate about 25 devotees instead of the original 6 who had recorded the Hare Krishna mantra. Furthermore, the Govinda arrangement includes several verses and choruses and complex Sanskrit words and phrasing, totally unlike the Hare Krishna mantra we were used to chanting many times a day. George asked the original 4 of us to go back into the studio and sing over our own choruses, which we gladly did 3 more times. So this was an effect that it would have the effect of many voices by them. It would be they would be singing over their own voices while listening to their previous recording, and that would layer the recording. He said it was fun, and we became 12, then 24, and finally 48 voices. And he says that George Harrison directed the whole session. He was a master at guiding our large group. George arranged a series of large sound diffusing panels around clusters of our singers and instrumentalists. Ishan played the trumpet, but George sent him out into the hallway. Jamuna, of course, we all know Jamuna sang the lead verses. Mukunda was the lead mridanga drum player, and I, meaning Gurudas, was the lead kartal player. Shyamsundar played the esraj, and Hari Vilas, who was born in Armenia, played the oud, his Middle Eastern notes cascading between verse and chorus. George played harmonium and the guitar introduction. And then later, George Martin directed the harpist and other members of the London Philharmonic, who created the huge ethereal wall of sound that makes Govinda so unique. So that's from this book, Love, Medicine, and Music. So then this record was made, and now this was a single, and it was sent to Srila Prabhupada in Los Angeles, where he was at the time. So it was pressed in London, and then it was sent to Los Angeles. And as Malti Prabhu was telling me the other day, that originally the devotees didn't want to tell, the devotees in Los Angeles weren't telling Srila Prabhupada about the activities of the devotees in London, because they thought that they had all fallen into Maya because they were associating with the Beatles, who are a rock group, so obviously we're in Maya, and so then if the devotees were hanging out with them, then they must be in Maya too. However, so Srila Prabhupada, asked, and he got the letter from them, and so then they said that they had sent the record, and he said, "Where's the record?" And so then the Los Angeles devotees gave him the record, and he said, "I want to hear the record." And they said, "Well, we don't have a record player." And he said, "Well, get a record player." So then by the next day, finally, he heard the recording. And on that very day, he decided that the recording would then go all over the world, that wherever there were temples of the International Society, it would be played at DD Greeting every day. And this is how we all have been hearing the Brahma-saṁhitā every day, from the deity greetings. And Rupa Mandri had also mentioned near the beginning of this pandemic that the verse of the Brahma-saṁhitā, it takes exactly 20 seconds. So as you all may recall from a year ago, we were told to wash our hands for 20 seconds. And some people have been singing happy birthday, but I have been singing that verse, Venum Kvanantam, whenever washing my hands, and maybe some others have been too. So this is how Brahma-saṁhitā has gone all over the world and has gone into our hearts from our singing it every day, and even maybe multiple times a day. So now let's go back into the presentation and look at the Brahma-saṁhitā itself. Are you seeing it?
I don't think you're sharing your screen.
Oh, okay. Let me try that again then. Share. Actually, I want to share. This screen, okay. Okay, now you're seeing it?
Yes, now it's back.
Okay, great. All right, so from the very beginning, we have the Sambandha Gyan. So you all are familiar with the division of the process of devotion is first is Sambandha Gyan, which is the knowledge of who is the Lord, who are we, what is the relationship between us, the ontology, all of this, the subject matter of who is who and what is what. Basically, that is Sambandha Gyan. And in the very first verse, we have that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. So here in particular, we have this sentence that he has an eternal, blissful, spiritual body. So this word vigraha, this is that he has a form. The Supreme Person has a form. And so in his purports, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is emphasizing that this scripture is a scripture of personalism. It is explaining that the highest, although the highest is supreme and transcendent, that doesn't mean that he can't have a form. In fact, he is the supermost form of while being transcendent. And so this is really the essence of Brahma-saṁhitā. And this is why our Srila Prabhupada had said that the full essence of Gaudiya Siddhanta is summarized in the Brahma-saṁhitā. So next. So here he is. He's in his form. He loves the cows. He's in this medium-sized form, which, as Srila Saraswati Thakur says, he is made this medium-sized form by his instrumental qualification. He has his inconceivable conciliating potency, that he can reconcile between a supreme, infinite, ineffable, inconceivable being. He has this two-handed form, this very sweet two-handed form, and that we can see him engaging in pastimes with the cows. So then in the next several verses, so I won't go through all of these verses individually, he starts by talking about this hexagonal figure. So in the next several verses, he's talking about Goloka. So this is verses 2 through 5, and he starts by talking about this yantra. So in this this next verse, he's talking about the yantra. Sorry, I didn't actually want to go so quickly, but so there's this 1,000-petaled lotus, and in the center of the lotus is the divine couple, Radha Krishna, and there's this thunderbolt-like syllable, the seed syllable, which is the embodiment of Shri Shri Radha Krishna. So this 18-syllable mantra, Srila Saraswati Thakur starts talking about it in the purport of this second verse. And so this is the 18-syllable mantra that we get at second initiation. So this Goloka we meditate on it as shaped like a lotus, and it is completely transcendental. It is completely beyond any of the aspects of any tinge of material influence. So that is Krishna Loka. And so something that Srila Saraswati Thakur is emphasizing frequently is that this is inconceivable. So we have to not mix our material conceptions with it. So then this cosmogony is what is described in great detail in Brahma-saṁhitā. So already Srila Saraswati Thakur is giving us a preview that there is Goloka. This was this 1,000-petaled lotus, and then beyond that there's Vaikuntha. There's many planets, Vaikuntha planets, and then we come down to Mahavishnu, and then from Mahavishnu emanate these material worlds. So this word yantra occurs in the third verse, and this is a hexagonal figure. This we saw in this previous picture. So yantra is often translated as a machine. You'll see that in many places Srila Prabhupada has translated it as a machine, but it's also in the purport of verse 3, Srila Prabhupada Saraswati Thakur talks about the hexagonal great transcendental machinery. So he's referring to this transcendental yantra. So there's also another translation of yantra is device. So this is a device for us to meditate upon. And so through our meditation, we can experience this spiritual realm of Goloka. And so these are some pictures of yantras. And it's said that it's Shatkona, so that's a 6-pointed device. And then so here's a picture of a yantra that we see in various yantras that you see in Vedic worship. So you see that the essence of the yantra is the 6-pointed figure with the whorls of the lotus. So the 6-pointed figure is in the center, the whorl of the lotus, and then the petals of the lotus around. And these petals are described later. So then in the next verse, he describes which is a long verse, he describes that there's Shvetadvip. So Shvetadvip, there is the Chaturvyuha, so there's the 4 expansions of Vishnu. They're Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. And then this Shvetadvip is then protected by the 10 Dikpals. So the 10 Dikpals they are bearing tridents, so they're the protectors of the 10 directions, and they're keeping anyone who is not qualified to reach that abode. They're holding them back. So, for instance, in the purport, Srila Saraswati Thakur describes various classes of people who are baffled in reaching Goloka. So he describes, for instance, the Ashtanga yogis, those who are interested in jnana and yoga, that they cannot reach the highest realm, and these 10 protectors. So there's 8 cardinal directions, and then there's above and below. Those are the 10 protectors. They're keeping them from reaching this highest abode. And Vrindavan Das Thakur, it says in the purport, it identifies this Shvetadvip with Navadvip. So Shvetadvip includes Vaikuntha, and that's the same as Navadvip, according to Vrindavan Das Thakur. So this instead of being 6, now remember that there was the surrounding square. So those are the abodes of those 4 Vishnu expansions, the first 4 Vishnu expansions. And Srila Saraswati Thakur also describes that there's the 4 Vedas, Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva, which issue from the 4 heads. And he also describes that they're also related to these are the 4 aims of material life: piety, wealth, passion, and liberation. These are the Chaturvarga. So this is on the outside, the square on the outside of that lotus. Whereas in the lotus, we're aiming at pure bhakti, which is the 5th aim, prema pumartha mahan, transcendental divine love. So that is beyond these 4-fold things. And Saraswati Thakur also says that these 10 protectors are existing in the form of mantra. So this is a very esoteric and transcendental mystical thing, that the mantra is that there's an identity between the sound, which Saraswati Thakur calls the nomenclature, that sound unfolds into forms and then into attributes, qualities, pastimes, into this whole realm. All of it unfolds from sound. And then there's different shaktis, different potencies. They're all existing in that realm. All right. So again, now we're seeing the outside is the 4-fold part. And I think I have to move a little bit more quickly, so I will keep going. Why is this not moving? This is not advancing. Right, so these were the 8-fold Okay. Okay, so now I will go through the next verses in a brief summary. I'll just explain the topics. So from the 6th verse, we understand that the Lord is completely spiritual. So then it describes that there is the Chinmay Shakti.
Somehow you hid the slideshow and are showing us your email.
That is not good at all. Let me stop sharing. All right. The name and author of the book I mentioned. So the Brahma-saṁhitā is, the author is Brahma, and the translator is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. I don't know if that's the book that the person is asking about. About sending the PowerPoint. So much of this was shared by Urmila Prabhu, so I'm not sure if she wants to share the PowerPoint, so one would have to ask her about that.
You meant Love Medicine and Music by Guru Das Prabhu.
Oh, yes. Okay, so let me just type Roger Siegel. Roger Siegel, Love, Medicine, and Music. Yes, I will type that there. All right, so let me see if I can start sharing properly again. So I think to minimize these changes, I'll just start sharing from the 29th verse. So meanwhile, I'll just speak from 6 to 29. 29 is where the Govindam prayers start. So in verse 7, so first in verse 6, the Lord explains that that the Lord is completely spiritual and he has his internal potency, Chinmay Shakti. Then there's the Viraja, which is the river of neutrality. It's in between the spiritual and material worlds. And then finally, there's the external potency, which is Maya Shakti. Then in verse 7, there's Mahashankarshan is in Mahavaikuntha, and then from him issues Mahavishnu. Then Mahavishnu glances at Maya Devi, and then Rama. So one thing is that there's various names used in these various verses. So if you're not familiar with the names, it may be a little bit confusing. But Rama Devi is the same as Lakshmi. So even Mahavishnu doesn't directly glance at the material energy. Rather, Lakshmi Devi carries his glance to Maya. And then the actual, the glance is received by Shambhu. So Shambhu is Lord Shiva. So the name Shambhu is used in these verses. And he is subject to the regulatrix of all entities, Lakshmi Devi. And from Lakshmi Devi also expands Uma Devi, or Maya. So then from the combination of Shiva and Maya comes this material creation. And then in the 9th verse, it says that the living beings are produced in the masculine and feminine genders. And in the 10th verse, we have that Shiva and Maya Devi, or Uma, are empowered by Mahavishnu for the creation of the 24 substances. So these are the elements of matter, the constituted particles. And then it says, the constituted particles in the form of pencils of effulgence of Mahavishnu are manifest as the individual souls. So we knew already from Bhagavad Gita that Krishna is the Bija Pradapita. He is the seed-giving father. But then in these verses of the Brahma-saṁhitā, it's explained that there's several levels of indirection before we come to the individual souls. And it's also explained in a Srimad Bhagavatam purport that these levels of indirection, that it's Lord Shiva who is directly in contact with the embodiment, and that Lord Vishnu, even Mahavishnu, does not come in direct contact with the material energy. And then but then we're reminded again in verse 11 that Mahavishnu, he is the creator of thousands of individual souls. So even though this is being carried out by Shiva and Uma, they're servants. They're servants of the Lord, and it is Mahavishnu who is ultimately the creator. So then so let's look at verse 12. It has a very nice short purport. So here we see that the purport says that Yoga Nidra, or the divine sleep, is spoken of as ecstatic trance, which is of the nature of the bliss of the true subjective personality. The above mentioned Rukmiṇī Devī is Yoga Nidra in the form of Yoga Maya. So Rukmiṇī Devī is the same as Lakshmi Devi. So this is an important point, that people think of Lakshmi as sometimes they use the word demigoddess. This is not quite correct. She is in fact internal spiritual potency. So she is Yoga Maya, she is Yoga Nidra, and she is the internal potency. So people who are bewildered, they worship her for money or fortune or wealth. So that is actually just a perverted reflection of Lakshmi Devi. So in actuality, she is the transcendental spiritual Shakti. All right. So then in verse 13, the Brahmandas are emerging from Mahavishnu. And then in verse 14, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is entering into each universe. Let's see if I can get to that picture. And in verse 15, there are the Guna avatars. I'll stop sharing this. And we get back to that cosmographic picture. Let me get to the right place in it. This could actually be a seminar over like several days. So so I'm trying to give you just a glimpse of everything that happens within the space of an hour, so that we'll have time for the activities. All right. Here we go. Share this. All right. So Mahavishnu, so you're seeing, I hope.
Yes.
All right. So Mahavishnu has entered into each universe as his own subjective portions. And so now you're seeing this picture of Mahavishnu. And then into each universe, in the next verse, we'll see that there's these are the Garbhodakshaya Vishnus. Oops. And so this is the relationship so in between here is this Viraja that we said. Here's Mahavishnu, and within each of these universes, there's Garbhodakshaya Vishnu.
There was a question about how is Lakshmi Devi the internal potency? Does that mean she's the same as Radharani? And maybe this picture would be a good time to answer that, because it shows the relation.
Yes, she's an expansion of Radharani. So here's are you seeing my pointer?
Yes.
So,
we're
so
seeing.
here's Krishna. There's actually Radha Krishna. So this Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is. So we had seen him earlier in the whorl of the lotus, so that you can actually vaguely see the lotus here. So we saw him together with Radha. Radha Krishna are the original. Srimati Radharani is the original internal potency. And on the other hand, we just heard Lakshmi Devi described as the potency of Mahavishnu. So she is a potency of Mahavishnu who is, and we heard her described as Yoga Nidra and Yoga Maya. So she is an expansion of Srimati Radharani, just as Mahavishnu is an expansion of Lord Krishna. And Mahavishnu is expanded in order to be in charge of this material section of creation. So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Mataji.
All right. Now, where are we? So then within each universe, there are the guna avatars. So from Mahavishnu's right side, there's Lord Brahma. And from between his eyebrows, there's Lord Shiva. And from his left side is Lord Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu, so this is Kshirodakshay Vishnu. He comes from his left side because the internal potency of Mahavishnu is on his left side. And so that Kshirodakshay Vishnu is Paramatma. So this is all said in the purport of verse 15. And in verse 16, we had said that Lord Shiva enshrines Ahankar. And then in verse 17, that the guna avatars, they do the creation, the maintenance, and the destruction. So the creation is done by Lord Brahma, who is also the avatar of Rajas, the mode of passion. The maintenance is done by Lord Vishnu, who is the guna avatar of Sattva, the mode of goodness. And the destruction is done by Lord Shiva, who is the guna avatar of Tamas, the mode of ignorance. And they each have their consorts. So in verse 17, Saraswati Thakur is explaining that the consort of Mahavishnu is Yoga Nidra, that the consort of Brahma is Savitri, the consort of Shiva is Uma, and the consort of Vishnu is Lakshmi. So then in verses 18 through 22, then there's the divine lotus emerging from the navel of Vishnu that we saw. Then in verse 23, Brahma seeks to create, but he sees nothing but darkness. And then in verse 24, Divya Saraswati, the divine Saraswati, initiates Brahma into the 18-syllable mantra. So we saw the 18-syllable mantra at the beginning on this hexagonal figure. And in the purport to verse 24, Saraswati Thakur says that this 18-syllable mantra has twofold power. It gives love of Krishna to those who are purely seeking it. And on the other hand, it also satisfies all sorts of desires of the mundane world for those who are seeking that. But of course, we, being practitioners of devotion, we're trying for the first purpose. So now let's look at verse 25. And this is a verse that can go to all of us. So this is spoken by Saraswati Devi, Divya Saraswati, to Lord Brahma. She says, "O Brahma, do thou practice spiritual association by means of this mantra, then all your desires will be fulfilled." So those of us who have received or are preparing to receive this mantra at second initiation, this is the instruction for all of us that we also that our guru gives at the time of second initiation, that by practicing that 18-syllable mantra, all our desires will be fulfilled. So then, amazingly, starting in verse 26, Lord Brahma meditates on Goloka. So this mantra is very short. you may have seen it or you may already know it. And amazingly, in this verse, Lord Brahma is meditating on everything. He's meditating on the divine lotus and everything that was described. And that is part of the mystical aspect of mantra, that from that sound unfolds the form. From that sound unfolds the form. And then let's go to number 27. Yeah, I have slides for these, but I think they're unfolding too, they would unfold too slowly. So let me. So then Gayatri, mother of the Vedas, being made manifest, i.e. imparted, by the divine sound of the flute of Sri Krishna, entered into the lotus mouth of Brahma, born from himself through his 8 ear holes. He has 4 heads. The lotus-born Brahma, having received the Gayatri, sprung from the flute song of Sri Krishna, attained the status of the twice-born, having been initiated by the supreme primal preceptor, Godhead himself. So this is a mantra. So then Saraswati Thakur then explains in the purport that, how do I stop sharing? Oh, have I stopped sharing, I hope? Yes.
Yes, you have.
Okay. So Saraswati Thakur has explained in the purport that this Gayatri referred to in this mantra is the Kama Gayatri, and that the Kama Gayatri is the sequel to the 18-syllable mantra. So when we receive it at second initiation, we receive all these mantras together. The 18-syllable mantra is not actually a Gayatri. So it doesn't end with Dhimahi. So for instance, when we're hearing about the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that it ends in Dhimahi, and it's invoking the Gayatri mantra. So that's a characteristic of Gayatri mantras. So rather, this 18-syllable mantra is the precursor that gives us that Gayatri. And in this purport, Saraswati Thakur says that the Gayatri is the mother of all the Vedas, and that Kama Gayatri is the highest Gayatri. That it is attained as the sequel of the 18-lettered mantra. So now let's then start going into the Govindam prayers. I will share my screen. Okay, so these slides were put together by Franny Lane of the Hare Krishna Society of Northeast Lincolnshire. So these are the very beautiful Govindam prayers. And the very first one is Chintamani Prakara Sadmasu. So Srila Prabhupada, this is when he first was teaching the Brahma-saṁhitā to the devotees. He started by teaching them these Chintamani prayers. He started referring to them as the Chintamani prayers. And so there's letters, for instance, letters to Jamuna and letters to other people, that he's very happy that we're the devotees were chanting these Chintamani prayers. And there's beautiful recordings of him himself singing these Chintamani prayers. So then the next one is the one that is famous, that we know. Oh, let me get rid of this. Sorry. That we know from the Didi greeting. Venum kvanantam aravinda dalayataksham. Y'all can sing along. Barahavatang samasitam buddha sundarangam kandarpakoti kamaniya vishesha shobham govindam adipurusham tamaham bhajami. So the devotees, so getting back to London, the devotees, when they were in London, they had been singing these prayers in different venues, and they had been singing multiple verses So I asked Malti Prabhu the other day, like, how did they pick these two verses? And she suggested that it may have been a question of timing, that so George was orchestrating the recording and had picked verses for the timing, and probably because this is actually giving us the whole thing, that this is giving us the Lord himself, Lord Krishna, his beautiful original form. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. So then, generally we skip this verse. However, in the recording, however, very interestingly, there's a purport. There's a short purport to this verse, and I'll just give you that whole purport. That explains that these first three verses are actually giving us the entire Goloka Dham. So in the purport, Saraswati Thakur says, in the shloka beginning with Chintamani Prakara, the transcendental region and the spiritual names of Govinda. So we start with the name and the dham, the nam and the dham. These are in the Chintamani Prakara verse 29. In the shlok beginning with Venum Kvanantam, the eternal beautiful form of Govinda, so that's the rupa, the form. And in this shloka, number 31, the amorous pastimes of Govinda, the embodiment of his 64 excellences, have been described. So that's the lila, the pastimes are described in this verse, the one about the beautiful, with the beautiful garland and the moon locket, and that he always revels in pastimes of love. So it says here, Tribhanga Lalitam, he's in his threefold bending form, and Keli Kala Vilasam, that he's in these pastimes of love. So this is Leela. So all of this is unfolding. It's all coming from that mantra. It's all coming from that sound. So, and Saraswati Thakur says, all the spiritual affairs that come within the scope of description in the narration of the ecstatic mellow quality rasa are included in the spiritual amorous sports of Govinda. So in other words, the entire spiritual realm is contained already in these three prayers. So now, I wanted to start with an activity, which is going back to the verse that we all know. Let me stop sharing. Venum Kvanantam. So I wanted to start with an activity, starting in the breakout rooms. And so we can break out into groups of three or four people, and we can spend 15 minutes in the breakout room. So please bring up that verse, Venum Kvanantam. I can put the link in the chat, so you can each have it. And then the activity, so you can do different activities. You can pick an activity to do with this verse. So you can say, you can look at each of the words in the verse and think, which of the lines of the verse is easiest to remember? Which of the qualities in the verse is your favorite? Which of these is a name that you know of anybody belonging to? So these are three different activities. Which of these is most fun to say? And so, in other words, basically play with this verse. If you have any favorite pictures that you feel are described by this verse and you feel you can share them, then that's another thing you can do. So you can decide among yourselves which of these activities you want to do with this verse. So I'll let you go to the breakout rooms, and you will have 15 minutes.
Just getting them set up right now. Okay.
Maybe in the meantime, you can answer, there was a question about, are the three names of Vishnu on the chat? You can answer that, lady. Mataji's question.
Right. So these names, they're mentioned in the purports. So Garbhodakshay Vishnu and Mahavishnu, as far as I recall, they are mentioned in the translations and purports. I don't recall whether the word Kshirodakshay appears in the purport, but it's definitely described, he's described as lying on the ocean of milk. So I think he's more often referred to as Paramatma in those purports. I did not see in the Sanskrit verses themselves those words, except Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu is explicitly described. But I haven't memorized the entire Brahma-saṁhitā, or actually most of it, so it could be that it's in there somewhere. I hope that answered that question.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll create the breakout rooms now. Open all rooms.
The next prayer. All right, so now, so those, as we had said, Saraswati Thakur had said that those first three verses of the Govinda prayers were giving us the entire realm, the transcendental realm of Goloka, in terms of name, form, qualities, and pastimes. Now, starting in verse 32, which is the second verse that is in the Govindam prayers that we sing every day, starting from verse 32 to 35, the prayers are describing Krishna's transcendence. So this is again Sambandha Gyan. So first we had this very beautiful form. He's a person. He's very lovable, and he's as lovable as our best friend. He is our dear most best friend. So he's very close to us. So then these next verses, 32 through 36, they're explaining, okay, so it is true that he's a person, he's a lovable, beautiful boy. However, at the same time, they're again reminding us that he's completely transcendental. So then here is verse 32, and you can sing along. Angani yasya sakalendriya vrittimanti
Shanti Bhanti
Layanti
Kalyanti
Chiranti
Ram Jaganti
Anandachari
Anandacharya Sarvim Bala Vigrahasya
Govindam
Vindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami.
I worship that original personality, Sri Govinda. His divine form is composed of eternity, cognizance, and bliss, and is therefore exceptionally effulgent. Each and every limb or sense of his transcendental body is inherently endowed with all the functions of all the other senses. He eternally sees, maintains, and regulates an infinite number of universes, both spiritual and mundane. So the first verse we were focusing on was showing how Krishna is a person and we can relate to him. And this verse is saying, okay, but he's not exactly a person like us. He's very different from us. So for instance, he can do anything with any limb. And this is something that we experience whenever we're making an offering to our deities. So this verse says that by glancing at that offering, that is the same as consuming that offering. So so that was actually the second activity. And so for this, I would like to take a shorter amount of time, let's say 10 minutes. And so in this room, can we pick an amazing quality of Krishna that shows that he is completely far out and beyond anything we could ever conceive? What is, or it could be a quality, or it could be an experience, maybe something you've experienced in your life, that how you've experienced that he did something really amazing that you could not have imagined before he did it. So, so we could have more breakout rooms.
Sure.
And how long do you want us to stay in the breakout rooms this time?
10,
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Okay.
10 minutes.
Also back. So now I will just conclude with an overview of the rest of the verses. I'll just be describing what is in them without without going into the verses too much. So again, these are the Franny Lane slides, and let me move that part. Okay, so we had just described that verses 32 through 35 are describing the transcendence of Lord Krishna. And then in verse 36, he explains that how to attain him, one attains him by mantra, and in the purport, Saraswati Thakur explains that one attains the respective abodes. So let me go back there. Yes, so there's different regions of the spiritual world, which the geography of the spiritual world is being described. And so depending on what one's aspiration is, one actually attains the relationship. So it says, those who are advocates of Shantaras attain the region of Brahma Paramatma, the seat of eternal peace. Those of Dasyaras get to Vaikuntha, the spiritual majestic abode of Srinarayan. Those of Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhuraras, which here he calls juvenile love, that's a very interesting phrase, attain Goloka Dham, Krishna's abode above Vaikuntha. And then the method of all this is that they worship Krishna by the suktas depicted in the Vedas. And so through these mantras, we get everything, and we get what we aspire for, we personally aspire for. So then the next verse is very interesting. So this verse 37 has an extremely long purport. So this is maybe the heart of the Govindam prayers, where the 64 arts that are done in Goloka are described by Saraswati Thakur in the commentary. And then he also says that Sri Jiva Goswami is our preacher of transcendental truth. And in the commentary, he says that Sri Jiva Goswami is himself, in the spiritual world, he's one of the manjaris. So they're the servants of these gopis. So here we're seeing depicted the gopis themselves. So here's Radha Krishna, here are the Ashtashakis, and they're already engaging in some arts like playing instruments and making garlands and they could be making scents and ointments and all kinds of things. So you see them engaged in some of the arts, and all of those arts are existing. And so everything that is in Gaudiya Siddhanta is in the Brahma-saṁhitā in a very, very condensed form. It's like sweet, thick cream. So Srila Prabhupada had said that he had recommended that the devotees study very scrutinizingly. And this is one of the things this is one of the purports to study particularly scrutinizingly. And then in verse 38, so this is this very famous verse, Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena. So this is the verse from which I derive the title of the talk, the eye seeing with the eye of devotion. So Saraswati Thakur says in his commentary about the eye of devotion, the eye of devotion is nothing but the eye of the pure, unalloyed spiritual self of the jiva. The form of Krishna is visible to that eye in proportion to its purification by the practice of devotion. So in these two sentences, he's explaining our whole purpose is to be able to see this transcendental realm by purifying ourselves through the practice of devotion. Then we can directly come to that abode that is described in these verses. So then I'll go next. So then Lord Krishna is the supreme. In the Bhagavatam, it says that, Ete Changsha Kalah Punksha Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. And this is one of the nutshell verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It says that Krishna is the original supreme personality of Godhead, and he's the origin of all the other avatars. So in this verse is also describing that Rama the Murtishu, the other avatars beginning with Ram. Here's Lord Ram, here's Lord Vamanadev, here's Lord Nrsingadev, but they're all coming from Sri Krishna. He's the source of Brahman in verse 40. In verse 41, he is the source of all existence, and that includes the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. They are all emanating from his external potency, so he's the ultimate origin of them. And the mundane worldly Vedic knowledge is also coming from there. Verse 42, so he's transcendental. And then in the commentary, Saraswati Thakur is explaining how that we can connect with that completely transcendental being through pure receptive cognition. This is what we're trying to cultivate, pure receptive cognition. And then he starts talking about how the various other beings and aspects relate with him, starting in verse. First in verse 43, he's talking about the worlds. So lowest of all is located Devi Dham, mundane worlds. So the Devi who is in charge of this Dham is Uma Devi or Maya Devi. That's where we are now. Next above it is Mahesha Dham, the abode of Mahesh. That's another name of Lord Shiva. So if you remember earlier, we were talking about how there were these 10 Dikpals, these protectors with the tridents who were keeping us out. So Lord Shiva is guarding the boundary between the mundane world and the spiritual world. So in the commentary, Saraswati Thakur explains that there's a lower part of Mahesh Dham, which is in darkness, and then there's an upper part, Sadashiva Dham, which is full of light. So that's where you cross the boundary to get to the spiritual world. Then above Mahesh Dham is placed Hari Dham, so that's Vaikuntha, the abode of Vishnu and all of the expansions and different forms of Vishnu. And above them all is located Krishna's own realm named Goloka, which is what we've been focusing on. So that's the spiritual geography or cosmography is explained in a nutshell in this verse and also in the commentary to verse 43. So then in verse 44, Krishna is the controller of Durga or Uma Devi. Verse 45, he is the controller of Lord Shiva. And this is a very mystical verse explaining what is the relationship between them, that just as milk is transformed into curd through acid, and yet, so curd is simultaneously one with and different from milk. So similarly, Shiva is simultaneously one with and different from Krishna. And from the Srimad Bhagavatam verse in the 12th canto, we know Vaishnavanam Jata Shambhu, that Lord Shiva is the best of Vaishnavas. Then in verse 46, this is describing Narayan. So he's describing how the light of one candle is being communicated to other candles, although it burns separately in them, is the same in its quality. So from one candle, another candle is lit, and another and another. So similarly, in the commentary, Saraswati Thakur is explaining that Krishna is the controller of Narayan. So Narayan is of the same qualities as Krishna, except there are 64 qualities of Krishna, and of these, so going back to Lord Shiva, we had up to 55. From ordinary living entities, we had up to 50. And even Lord Narayan, he is the same in quality, but not completely. There's 4 remaining qualities that are only this original Supreme Lord Krishna has. So these are Leela Madhuri, that he performs wonderful pastimes. Rupa Madhuri, he has this supremely attractive form. Venu Madhuri, that he plays this wonderful flute, although he probably plays with fruit too. And Prema Madhuri, that he's surrounded by a loving circle. Mandita Prema Mandala, he's surrounded by this loving circle. So these are the last 4 qualities that are given by Srila Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and in the Nectar of Devotion. So here he's the source of Narayan and various other Vishnu expansions. In verse 47, it says that he is the source of Anantashesh, and who bears the name of Shesh. So this is, in this picture, you can very beautifully see Shesh. In many pictures, he's sort of, in the background, but here you can see that he's replete with the all-accommodating potency. And so here Lord Vishnu is sitting up, but mostly he's reclining in the causal ocean with the infinity of the world in the pores of his hair, and he enjoys creative sleep, yoga nidra. Sleep is indeed, even for us, is important for creativity. So, but he has nothing to do himself. He has all these servants that we just began describing and are continuing to describe. So he's just engaging in sleep. And then here we have Mahavishnu, that Brahma and other lords of the mundane worlds are appearing from the pores of the hair of Mahavishnu, and they remain alive as long as the duration of one exhalation. So Mahavishnu is just breathing in and out, and his out breath is the same as the life of Lord Brahma. So we know from elsewhere that the life of Lord Brahma is 311 trillion years. So that's why he's called Mahavishnu. He's so great that his exhalation is lasting 311 trillion years. And then he's in verse 49, he's saying that Lord, so this is the aim of these Brahma-saṁhitā prayers, is for the Lord to impart creative power to Lord Brahma. So Lord Brahma receives his power for the regulation of the mundane world from Lord Govinda, just as the sun manifests some portion of his light in effulgent gems like the ruby, the Suryakanta. So just as this tiny ruby is, pretty much nothing compared to the brilliant and massive sun, so similarly, Lord Brahma is, even though he's the most important living entity in our universe, the creator, he's the secondary creator, and he's just in that proportion insignificant compared to Krishna. So people who have a ordinary view of, so-called Hinduism, they think, there's 3 gods, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, but this is not really correct. So that's one wonderful thing about the Brahma-saṁhitā, is it makes very clear the relationships among all of these entities. They're all explained in detail, in a succinct way. So then in verse 50, he's the controller of Ganesh, And we know that in particular, Ganesh is a worshiper of Lord Nrsimha. He keeps Lord Nrsimha on he's on top of his head, on his tusks. And we had in an earlier verse that Lord Nrsimha himself is an expansion of Lord Krishna. So then there's these multiple stages of expansion and subordination that are being described in the Brahma-saṁhitā. Now this is a very interesting verse 51, because it gives a division of the elements that we don't actually see elsewhere. We see these elements, but we don't see this particular division. So I'll just read that sentence. The three worlds are composed of the 9 elements, viz. Fire, earth, ether, water, air, direction, time, soul, and mind. So these 5 elements, fire, earth, ether, water, air, that's more common. And direction, time, soul, and mind, this is a subset of some of the elements that we see. However, whatever elements, and in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Krishna is speaking to Uddhava, then Uddhava asks, well, some people say that, there's 24 elements. Various people say that there's different numbers of elements. Why is this? And Krishna basically says, well, it's actually inconceivable. So different people are dividing them in different ways, different learned sages. So this is another interesting division. And so all the 3 worlds are made up, the 3 worlds being the 3 worlds of the material world. So those are the heavenly planets, the hellish planets, and the earthly planets. These are all made up of these elements, and they enter back into Mahavishnu, and ultimately, they're originating from Lord Govinda, so they enter back in when he breathes in. Then here's, let me move that so you can see. So Lord Krishna is also the origin of the sun, and so by his order, the sun performs his journey mounting the wheel of time. And so we talked earlier about a couple of the mantras that we receive in second initiation. So there's the 18-syllable mantra, and then there's the Kama Gayatri mantra. So then also the Brahma Gayatri mantra is related to the sun, the chariot of the sun. So there's Surya Narayan is ultimately to be worshipped within the sun. And the sun himself, Surya Dev, is controlled by Krishna. And now in verse 53, it's like, well, he's the origin of everything. So he's the origin of the manifested potencies that are found to exist, the virtues, so that's dharma, the Vaishnavas, the vices. So even the lowest papa nichaya, the lowest sins, they're ultimately, everything is coming from him because he's the source of everything. He's the cause of all causes. Although he is transcendental to all of this. So we've had enough earlier in this series that says that he's transcendental to everything that's emanating from him in this material world. He's the source of the Vedas, the disciplines or tapas, and all the jivas, the living beings. And according to this verse, he is the rewarder of karma and the burner of karma. So he burns up to their roots all fruitive activities of those who are imbued with devotion. So those, for those of us on the path of bhakti, then he is the one who enables us to become eventually purely on the path of bhakti. And for those, and he says he impartially ordains for each the due enjoyment of the fruits of one's activities of all those who walk in the path of work. So for those on the path of karma, he's the one who is awarding justly the fruits of their activities. And this, time permitting, we'll come back to when we come to the verses at the end. How do we get from the path of karma to the path of bhakti? So in verse 55, it's saying that he is the order of relations in rasa. And so this is a nice picture, particularly for Valentine's Day, this is what we're aiming for. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, the meditators of whom, by meditating upon him under the sway of wrath, amorous passion, natural friendly love, fear, parental affection, delusion, reverence, and willing service, attain to bodily forms befitting the nature of their contemplation. So you can see in that there's these lists that there's both the primary rasas, there's 5 primary rasas, and some of the secondary rasas are listed here. So for instance, wrath and fear, these are examples of secondary rasas. So these we learn of in the Nectar of Devotion, these 5 primary rasas and these 7 secondary rasas. And what Brahma is saying here is that Krishna is the one who he's Akhila Rasamrita Sindhu. He is the ocean of all rasa, and he is the one who awards us with the ability to relate to him in an eternal loving relationship in that rasa. So that is the prayojana. So all this time we were talking about all these entities within this material world, the celestial beings who are in charge of this material world. And so this was all actually part of Sambandha Gyan, knowing what is what. And now, starting in verse 55, we're coming to prayojana. Prayojana is knowing the goal. The goal is that we will have an eternal relationship with him in rasa. Why is this not advancing? Okay, I will just stop sharing and go back to the other screen. Okay, so there are the so now the Govindam prayers have ended, and now we have the vision of the spiritual world itself. Oops, what happened here? Where did it go? What am I sharing? Am I sharing?
You have the Virala Seldom is Sri Brahma-saṁhitā 556 word index.
Okay, I am sharing
Page.
that, but for some reason I'm not seeing it. It's very odd. Which, oh, that is not.
But I don't think we really want the index. I think we want the verse.
It's not, okay, all right, yes.
Yeah, now it's in the right place.
Okay. All right, so here are these beautiful prayers, and you've heard them being sung. So for lack of time, I won't sing them, but this is the very beautiful prayers describing the spiritual world. And so I'll just read a little bit of it, that every tree is a transcendental purpose tree, where the soil is the purpose gem, all water is nectar, every word is a song, every gate is a dance, the flute is the favorite attendant, and so forth. So this is our goal. This is where we're trying to get to. It's Goloka Vrindavan Dham. And this is where there's eternal bliss. Where there is eternal existence of transcendental time, who is ever present and without past or future, and hence is not subject to the quality of passing away, even for the space of half a moment. So that means, so we're always experiencing here in this mundane world that even if after a lot of discipline and penance, we obtain something that we think we desire and we're happy with it, then it's temporary and it goes away. So even if, on Valentine's Day, we meet our Valentine and we, quote unquote, live happily ever after, that doesn't actually happen because, one or the other of us would die. But what we're aiming for is the eternal, supreme, divine love, where there is nothing passes away from us. There's no passing away. So that's the eternal realm that we're looking for. This is the prayojana. So then, finally, now that this is the end of Lord Brahma's own prayers, and then the Supreme Lord answers in the last several verses of the Brahma-saṁhitā from 57 to 61. So I'm only going to go to verse 59. So this is stated very eloquently in a nutshell. The highest devotion is attained by slow degrees by the method of constant endeavor for self-realization with the help of scriptural evidence, theistic conduct, and perseverance in practice. So we have to, understand the Shastra. We have to do sadachar, the good conduct, and we have to do our practice, sadhana. Shastra, sadachar, and sadhana. So in these last verses of the Brahma-saṁhitā, Krishna is explaining abhideya, the process. And so this is the summary of the process. And then finally, I had said I would go back to how do we go from karma to bhakti. So that's in verse 61. Well, here. So basically, it's the consciousness. So when these acts are performed for one's selfish enjoyment, they're called karmakanda. When the desire for attainment of freedom from activity by knowledge underlies these actions, they're termed jnana yoga or karma yoga. So it's very interesting. We think of jnana yoga and karma yoga as two very different paths, but it's actually all in the consciousness. And so the consciousness, the knowledge, that knowledge is underlying the actions, that's what makes it jnana yoga and karma yoga. And when these activities are managed to be performed in this way that is conducive to our endeavor for attainment of bhakti, they're called jnana bhakti yoga, the subsidiary devotional practices, but only those activities that are characterized by the principle of pure worship are called bhakti proper. So it is basically our consciousness that we keep meditating on him. He says, fill all of these activities with meditation on me. Shri Krishna says, this world subsists by the constant performance of certain activities. Fill all these activities with meditation of me. They will then be the nature of my service. So that's so this is what we have to have in our practice. And Srila Prabhupada said that our mantra is not an impersonal mantra. It is personal. This is personalism, and he really encouraged his devotees to read the Brahma-saṁhitā scrutinizingly and to imbibe it and to infuse our mantras, so which we both have our japa and also our meditation during the course of our lives. It should be infused with this remembrance. So with that, I will conclude, and thank you for your coming and your participating. And if you have any questions, there's not much time for you, so any of you could go, but I'm here for questions if anybody wants to ask.
So thank you so very much, Rukmiṇī Devī dāsī, for your time and association and for sharing all of this wisdom with us. Vaishnavis, does anyone have any questions?
So I should answer. There's a question in the chat. They were made by someone named Franny Lane. Or was it .com or .org? Let me just, it was actually on the bottom of each slide.
.com. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was .com, yeah.
Yeah, so yes, this person, Franny Lane, who is very artistic, made those slides. So, and yes, the earlier part before the Govindam prayers, I had slides by Urmila Devi Dāsī. So Her Grace had also kindly shared her slides with me.
Thank you so much,
Hare Krishna,
Rukmiṇī.
Mataji.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Someone has a question?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Please go ahead with your question.
So my question was, when Krishna glances over the material energy, when he wants to create the universe, my understanding from one of the lectures I attended was that Srimati Radharani becomes his glance, and Maya, material energy, is Srimati Radharani's maidservant. So she then carries out the order of creating the universe um, um, under the instruction of Srimati Radharani. Is that understanding correct? Just wanted to confirm.
Yes. So in the it is correct. Part of there's one thing a little bit missing, which is that there's also Srimati Radharani expands as Lakshmi Devi, but who is ultimately one with Srimati Radharani. So in the Brahma-saṁhitā itself, it's she's deemed the regulatrix. Saraswati Thakur uses this word, and yes, it says that. So the glance itself, it doesn't. Even Mahavishnu's glance is also transcendental, so it has no direct contact. So yes, as you said, it has to be carried, and so yes, she carries it to the external potency, Maya Devi, who is her reflection, along with Lord Shiva, and they actually carry out the embodiment of the living beings. So they're sort of the more direct father and mother of the universe is Shiva and Uma Devi. So is that answering your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna, Rukmiṇī. I have just one question. I believe it was when we were going over verse 37, and you mentioned from the text that we are aspiring to get to pure receptive cognition.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we do that? How do we get to that place, that stage?
So I can't say that I should say that all this stuff that I've been saying, I'm repeating what is being said by my Guru Varga, the gurus. It's not that I am in the state of pure receptive cognition, but that is the subject of these abhideya, the practice, these last verses. So these purify us. So that's verse 59 that said that we need to study the Shastra, scriptural evidence. We need to do theistic conduct, sadachar. And one thing about sadachar is that through sadachar, theistic conduct, that will enable us to have sadhu sangha, the association of the saintly people. So they will purify us. And sadhana, perseverance in our practice. So these three things, these will purify our cognition. So, and we also have to have this receptive mood. So for instance, it says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 verse 34 that we must inquire submissively and render service and ask tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. So it says that we have to surrender and render service and inquire, and all of these, and then from listening to these answers to our inquiries and from getting the association, which we get by surrendering and rendering service of the sadhus, that's how that purifies our consciousness.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. Well, before we let you all go, we just have a few things to tell you about, a few announcements for our next sanghas.
So just before that, let me just offer my obeisances to all of you. Vanchakalpatrubhascha kripasindubhevach patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rukmiṇī Mataji. And so do you need to leave or? Okay, okay. Okay, so again, I just wanted to share a few announcements with all of you. February 20th is our next Bond of Love in the interview series. And we will be having Rukmiṇī Devī. Just to note that this particular Bond of Love interview begins at 2:00 Eastern time. So just note that little time shift. Some of them have been different times. Also on the 27th, February 27th, we will be hosting a presentation called No COVID, No COVID. So it's a presentation by Shama Gopi, and she will be, Shama Gopi is a PhD in biochemistry and is presently working on research as a research scientist for Rush University in Chicago. And so she will be giving us a presentation on the virus itself, as well as the vaccine. This is something that she's been studying. So please join us for that as well. I think we all need to get that information. And then our next Sangha, like this, will be March 27th with Rukmiṇī Devī dāsī. So I hope that you can all join us for that as well. So just keep a lookout in your email and our Facebook page. And of course, you can always go to the YouTube channel to rewatch this video as well, because there was so much incredible information, and the depth of it is sometimes we need to see these things more, see and hear these things more than once. So thank you all so very much for joining us today. And thank you again, Rukmiṇī, and thank you again for your time, your association, and everything that you shared with us. It was quite an amazing class. There was a lot there. I'm definitely going to go back and watch the video. So please come back. And yes, let's pay our obeisances to Rukmiṇī and to all the Vaishnavas once again. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patita nam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Rukmiṇī Devī dāsī ki jai. Jai.